Beneath the border between Switzerland and France, there's a machine the size of a small city that smashes particles together millions of times a second. And millions of times a second, it watches energy simply vanish. We know exactly how much goes missing. We have never once asked what might be on the other side, catching it. Because the frightening part of physics isn't what we can't explain. It's the stuff we've explained perfectly. And the doors that math leaves standing open. 7 of them. And the last one isn't about something hiding inside our universe. It's about who built it. Number 7, the missing energy. Every collision inside that machine obeys one rule that has never, not once, been observed to break. The energy going in has to equal the energy coming out. It's bookkeeping, and the universe does not make bookkeeping errors. So when the physicists at the 2 big detectors record a crash where less momentum comes out than went in, they don't shrug. They write it down, and it happens hundreds of millions of times a year. They call it missing transverse energy. The safe explanation is neutrinos, ghostly little particles that slip through the entire detector without touching a thing. Fine, but back in 1998, 3 physicists, Nima Arkani-Hamed, Savas Dimopoulos, and Gia Dvali, put forward something stranger. Gravity, they pointed out, is absurdly weak, weaker than the other forces by a factor so large you'd run out of zeros writing it down. Their answer? Gravity isn't actually weak. It's leaking, draining out of our 3 dimensions into extra ones the other forces can't reach. If that's true, some of the missing energy in those collisions isn't neutrinos at all. It's little pieces of gravity escaping somewhere else. The detectors have searched for exactly that signature across billions of collisions, and so far the result is nothing conclusive, which sounds reassuring until you sit with what it actually means. Energy leaking passively into an empty room looks completely identical to energy being pulled through a doorway by something standing on the far side. From our end, the math is the same. The momentum just goes. We built the largest machine in human history to measure that absence with almost perfect precision, and we've never seriously asked what might be on the other side of the wall, quietly collecting it. That one's about something reaching in. The next one is about something we might already be walking through. Number 6, the places that aren't quite here. In 1975, a man named Jacques Vallée published a scientific paper with a very dry title and a very strange argument. Vallée was no crank. He held a master's in astrophysics and a doctorate in computer science, and he'd spent a decade building one of the first computer databases of anomalous aerial sightings for the French. And after all that data, his conclusion was this: the strangest cases didn't behave like machines flying through the sky. They behaved like something appearing and disappearing at the same fixed spots on the map, over and over, in the same places. Mainstream physics ignored him. But here's what's changed since. Physics now takes seriously a class of things called topological defects, places where the fabric of space itself is folded or stressed, left over from the violent first moments after the Big Bang. Cosmic strings, domain walls, and the math describing them has gotten good enough to model regions where 2 different geometries could brush up against each other. Not permanently, flickering, opening and closing as the local geometry shifts. Now stay skeptical, because you should. But in 2017, the United States Department of Defense confirmed something it had denied for years. A program quietly funded to the tune of $22 million that had cataloged objects doing things aircraft cannot do. Instant stops, right angle turns at impossible speed, no wings, no exhaust, no heat. And in several of those files, the same detail Vallée flagged in 1975. Objects showing up at the exact same coordinates across separate incidents, years apart. A domain wall crossing our 3 dimensions at a fixed point wouldn't be a spaceship. It would be a spot where the rules bend, and topology has a cruel feature. There's no gentle slope across a boundary like that. You're on one side or you're on the other, no middle. So if those crossing points are real and fixed in space, then some of them sit in ordinary places. Places you drive past. Places you might walk through on a Tuesday and never feel a thing. That's something sharing our map. The next one shares the chair you're sitting in, the air in your lungs, and every atom of the room around you. And the reason we've never caught it has nothing to do with it hiding. Number 5, the life that walks through walls. Around 2010, a well-respected astrobiologist named Paul Davies put a genuinely unsettling idea to the scientific community, and NASA took it seriously enough to say it was worth investigating. His question was simple. If life started on Earth once, from chemistry, what stops it from having started a second time? A completely separate tree of life, using the same air, the same atoms, but built on a different chemical rulebook. The catch is that we'd never have found it. Every test we've ever built to detect life was designed to detect our kind of life. And every living thing we have ever examined across every species on Earth uses left-handed amino acids. Every single one. So, a second biology built on right-handed molecules wouldn't be hiding from us. It would just be chemically invisible. Our tests wouldn't fail to find it. They'd fail to react to it at all. Two forms of life breathing the same air, unable to touch, poison, or even notice each other. Now push that one step further into the physics. Imagine life bound to a very slightly different set of quantum states than ours. Same atoms, same space. But the overlap between its matter and yours is, mathematically, almost exactly zero. Physicists have a word for that, orthogonal. Two things occupying the same place while being, in the deepest sense, unable to interact. Something like that wouldn't walk through your wall because it's a ghost. It would walk through because, to it, the wall isn't there. And every so often, over the timescales of geology, a freak quantum fluctuation could force the two to touch for an instant. It wouldn't be gradual. It couldn't be. It would be sudden, local, and something that neither side's chemistry ever evolved to survive. So far, everything on this list has been something out there, reaching in. Everything from here on is warts, because the next three aren't about things inside our universe. They're about what might be holding it. Stay with me, because this is where the floor drops out. Number 4, the thing that's watching. This is the oldest crack in physics, and it has never been sealed. In the 1920s, Bohr and Heisenberg handed us the rulebook for the quantum world, and it works better than almost anything in science. But buried in the middle of it is one word nobody has ever been able to define: the observer. Here's the problem, and it's real, not mystical. A particle exists as a smear of possibilities until something measures it. Then, instantly, it becomes one definite thing. But what counts as measuring it? In 1932, the mathematician John von Neumann proved something that should keep you up at night. You can draw that line anywhere. The detector, the wire, the computer, the scientist's eye, the scientist's brain. The math doesn't care where you put the boundary. It gives the same answer every time. It never tells you what the observer actually is. Physicists have spent 100 years trying to nail that word down. Wigner showed the problem only gets worse when you bring human consciousness into it. And it is still, today, one of the deepest unsolved holes in all of physics. So here's the door. The math never says the observer has to be human, or conscious, or even inside our universe. It only says that when a particle interacts with something acting as a measurement, it becomes real. Now imagine something outside our 3 dimensions, watching the quantum states of our world from a higher vantage point. Every particle it looked at would snap into being, and from in here, that would look identical to particles simply deciding to become real on their own, which is what we see everywhere, all the time. The single most fundamental act in physics, a particle turning from maybe into is, depends on a word we've failed to define for 100 straight years. And nothing, anywhere, has ever confirmed that the thing doing it lives inside our universe. And that one only watches. The next one doesn't. Because there is a single sentence, buried in a physics paper from 1980 that I'd argue is the most quietly terrifying line ever printed in a peer-reviewed journal. It's written so politely that most people read straight past it. Number 3. The wave that ends everything. In 1980, two physicists, Sidney Coleman and Frank DeLucia, worked out a genuinely terrifying possibility with cold mathematical precision. What if the vacuum of space, the empty nothing everything sits in, isn't actually the most stable state it could be? What if we're balanced on a ledge, with a deeper valley below us we simply haven't fallen into yet? They ran the numbers, rad, and then they wrote this, that you could at least draw some stoic comfort from imagining that the replacement universe might eventually sustain, if not life as we know it, then at least some structures capable of knowing joy. And then the next sentence, this possibility has now been eliminated. That's it. That's the line. Two physicists in a technical journal calmly noting that they had just ruled out joy. What they meant is this: chemistry stops. Atoms don't hold together. Nothing built from matter as we know it survives. For a while it stayed an intriguing calculation. Then in 2012 and 2013, the collider measured the mass of the Higgs boson, and the number came back at a value physicists describe with one specific, uncomfortable word: metastable. Our vacuum is probably stable for far longer than the universe has existed, but not certainly, not forever, and not immune to being pushed. Here's the door the original paper didn't walk through. It only asked about the vacuum collapsing by random chance. But the trigger depends on local conditions. In principle, a concentrated enough burst of energy at a single point could tip it over deliberately far sooner than chance ever would. And once it starts, a bubble of the new vacuum expands outward in every direction at the speed of light, which means no warning can outrun it, no signal, no alarm. The first sign that it's coming, anywhere in the universe, is that it's already here. And from the inside, it would have always looked completely empty, right up until the instant it wasn't. So that's how it could end. But the next one asks something worse. Not how it ends, but whether the room you're sitting in has any real depth to it at all. And this doesn't come from the fringe. It comes from one of the most cited pieces of mathematics in modern physics. Number 2, the universe as a projection. In 1997, a physicist named Juan Maldacena showed that a universe with gravity filling a three-dimensional space can be described perfectly, completely, with no information lost, by physics living on the two-dimensional surface around it. Every event inside, every particle, every force, all of it fully written into the boundary. It grew out of Stephen Hawking's work on black holes, which turned up something bizarre. The maximum amount of information you can pack into any region of space isn't set by its volume. It's set by its surface area, the stuff on the outside, and that led to a conclusion serious people now take seriously, that the flat boundary isn't a shadow of the inside. The inside is a projection of the boundary. The surface is the real thing. The depth is the picture. Think about an old photograph of a room. All the depth you see in it, the far wall, the space between the chairs, none of that is really in there. It's a flat piece of paper. The depth is something your eye builds. Now apply that to the room you're actually sitting in. Whether this applies to our universe exactly is still an open fight, and I want to be honest that the math doesn't transfer cleanly to the shape we actually live in. But the core idea that everything in a volume is encoded on its edge is now considered a basic feature of any real theory of gravity. And the people who built it, Maldacena himself, Leonard Susskind at Stanford, and the Dutch Nobel laureate, who first proposed the whole idea back in 1993, have all argued that some version of it has to hold for our universe too. So follow it to the end. If there's a boundary that holds the full description of everything we are, then anything with access to that surface would hold the complete readout of our entire reality. Every particle, every force, every thought you have ever had. And that mathematics describes a universe which is a projection, while saying absolutely nothing about who or what is holding the projector. Which brings us to the last one, and this is the one I promised you at the start. Number 1, the universe that was built. In 2016, 3 physicists, David Thouless, Duncan Haldane, and Michael Kosterlitz, won the Nobel Prize for showing that certain physical systems can be protected. Not by force, not by strength, by shape, by the pure mathematical geometry of how they're arranged. A state protected this way cannot be knocked loose by any ordinary disturbance, no matter how hard you push. Because breaking it would mean changing the entire geometry all at once. The topology itself is the armor. Now here is the fact that should stop you cold. The fundamental constants of our universe, the speed of light, the mass of the electron, the strength of every force, are not predicted by any theory we have. We don't derive them. We measure them, and we plug the numbers in by hand. And the most infamous of them, the energy of empty space, is off from what theory says it should be by roughly 120 orders of magnitude. It's the worst prediction in the history of physics. The real value just happens to be small enough and stable enough to let galaxies form and stars ignite and chemistry work. And nobody knows why. The leading explanation is basically a shrug. There might be an unimaginable number of possible universes, and we live in this one because we couldn't exist in the others. But that explains nothing about why our particular set of laws is so perfectly, persistently stable. Topological protection offers a different answer. Our constants might be locked in place by geometry. And here's the part that turns the lights off. In a laboratory, topologically protected states do not happen by accident. They are engineered, designed, deliberately built to be stable. So a universe whose laws are held in place by that same kind of protection is a universe whose geometry was configured to lock those laws down. Not a natural resting state, a managed one, and whatever could set that up wouldn't be a visitor to our universe. It would be its architect. Our laws wouldn't be the way things are. They'd be boundary conditions imposed from outside and held there. Our universe is not the obvious default outcome. It is a wildly improbable arrangement that has stayed standing against every reason it should have collapsed. And the question physics still can't answer is whether that's luck, whether it's mathematics, or whether it's something that meant for us to be here. None of these 7 is a claim that something is out there. Not one. Every single one is a place where our best, most tested physics is simply not allowed to tell us that nothing is. That's the whole difference. And it's the part that keeps me up at night. If this is the kind of thing your brain likes to chew on, there's another video waiting on screen right now that goes straight down this same rabbit hole. Go watch it and subscribe so the next door I find comes straight to you.